This presentation is for negotiation purposes only, and it's strictly confidential. We are bringing you the case as a preview of the trial in this matter. We've prepared this presentation for the decision makers in this case so that you can assess the risk involved, the monetary risk involved by trying this case. We'll also walk through this presentation very matter of fact. I try to stay as business oriented as I can and remove as much emotion at this point as possible. Please don't think that's not how we will be at trial. We will bring the emotion and as best we can for the trial of this matter. LKQ and Keystone, one company. Our jurors recognize right away how large LKQ is. Trial date is approaching. LKQ has a large fleet of not just regular vehicles, 3/4 ton trucks, but 18-wheelers and box trucks. And our jurors see these vehicles on the highway. The reputation of the LKQ logo when it comes to safety is not good. LKQ and Keystone, from the beginning of this case, when we started our investigation, it became obvious that LKQ and Keystone are one. However, for some reason, the defense in this case has tried desperately to make it look as if LKQ and Keystone are not one. However, you can see from our visual aid that we'll use at trial of this matter, we will prove how LKQ and Keystone are all together. There is no corporate veil to pierce because LKQ and Keystone pierced it from the very beginning. It's going to be very interesting to actually have to try this case and this be an issue before our jury because you, the defense, have made it an issue in this case. Here's a preview, another visual aid we've created for the opening statement in this case about how the LKQ Keystone puzzle pieces move together. Ironically, the Keystone logo has an LKQ company built in, as well as most of the LKQ logos have Keystone built in. But as we talk to the other drivers, current employees of LKQ, who did they say paid them, which is a big factor that our judges and juries will look to.
Okay. All right. Let's move on. Let me ask you, do you get your check direct deposited by LKQ?
Yes, sir.
Just like Chancellor and McMillan did. Now, when we look at your other drivers in this case and we ask them what is the chain of command, what do they tell us?
Can you tell me a little about your chain of command? Who's above you?
Mitch Mosley is my boss now.
Mitch Mosley?
Yes.
And he's the general manager for LKQ?
He is.
Yep.
Do what you broke out, do what?
Who's above Mitch?
Jeff Kildow.
Jeff Kildow. What is his job title?
Mitch is general manager. I'm not sure what Jeff Kildow's title is. He's above him, though.
But he's something. Is he like a regional manager for LKQ?
He has a title similar to that. I've never seen this title on paper or anything. I just know he's my boss.
All right. So who in LKQ is above Mitch Kildow?
Todd Knadel.
Witnesses are very clear about the chain of command at LKQ. It's not even in their nature to say Keystone. Matter of fact, here's an exhibit to another gentleman that we deposed, a current employee, Mr. Rawls, and we asked him to write down this chain of command, and he writes LKQ at the top. It's a very interesting debate because this issue of LKQ versus Keystone adds value to the case for lots of reasons. It adds value for jury exposure. It also opens up a major exposure risk for LKQ because of an exhibit we're about to look at. As we walk through the puzzle pieces and we build the evidence, just like we will at trial, you can see our organization and the photograph from the Jonesboro warehouse, another exhibit from one of your current employees, Mr. Slater. What does it say right on the building?
The purpose of this policy is to provide guidelines relating to pre-employment criminal background check and drug test for prospective LKQ employees. True?
True. As laid out by Mitch Mosley, the manager of the LKQ Keystone facility in Jonesboro, Arkansas. Now, here's the reason why this is a big issue for LKQ. Once we go to trial in this matter and the judge and the jury deliver a verdict against LKQ for what has happened in this case, it's going to open up the exposure for all of the companies affiliated, in your terms, subsidiaries, but merged together with LKQ across the country. And of course, Keystone is just one of many. This exhibit came through your corporate representative, Chris Foster, when he walked us through all the different companies that are LKQ. Continue to walk through. During the LKQ Keystone corporate representative's deposition, he outlined for us who the chief executive officer of LKQ is. Meanwhile, he also testified that LKQ doesn't have a chief executive officer, even though public documents from LKQ designate who the chief executive officer is. Also, the same public documents that we're going to have to use to show that LKQ has employees note it's $188 billion in size value. More documents, as your side for some reason has desperately defended and claimed that LKQ and Keystone are completely separate, the documents say just the opposite. LKQ's combination with Keystone. We believe the merger. This is your language, not ours. And of course, it was used by your corporate representative. Transaction affords LKQ and Keystone the opportunity to create an even stronger organization. Career opportunities for LKQ and Keystone employees. It's so interesting to see all these public documentation where it talks about LKQ's employees. It creates a credibility issue for your designated corporate representative who tried to make claim under oath that LKQ had no employees. And of course, some of the most important pieces of the puzzle is your driver, Chancellor McMillan, and his testimony. Here's Chancellor McMillan.
And so when you filled out your application form, I mean, just like it says right here, you believe that you are an employee filling out an employee relationship with the LKQ Corporation. True?
Correct. He believed it's LKQ.
And there's also information in here that talks about Keystone. True?
Yes.
Okay. And so you believe that you were filling out an application to be an employee for LKQ and Keystone. True?
Well, it's all the same thing.
It's all the same.
It's all the same thing per the defendant driver in this case. And of course, something that we've never seen before, when the defendants are claiming desperately that they are not the same, that LKQ and Keystone is not the same entity, for the first time ever have we experienced this. LKQ and Keystone designated the exact same person as the corporate representative for each company. This in and of itself is undeniable proof that LK and Keystone are one and the same, and that this trial there will be a verdict delivered against LKQ. This case is about punitive damages. Punitive damages. I want to talk about and start with the law in this case. This is the jury instruction that the judge will give to our jury. In every piece of evidence that we show from this point forward will allow your committees, as you do the exposure and analysis on this case over the upcoming weeks, to know for certain that you will receive a punitive damage verdict in this case. Punitive damages may be imposed to punish a wrongdoer to deter the wrongdoer and others from similar conduct. In order to recover punitive damages from LKQ Keystone, the estate of Mr. Hardesty has the burden of proving by clear and convincing evidence. That language is so important, and you'll see why here in a moment. LKQ Keystone knew, or ought to have known, in light of the surrounding circumstances, that its conduct would naturally and probably result in injury or death, and that it continued such conduct in reckless disregard of the consequences from which malice may be inferred. Now, we like to break that down to a simple punitive damages chart, because simple is what we do. And this chart's a chart we'll use for the jury. You'll see it in the opening statement, but LKQ Keystone knew or should have known. We'll prove that they knew that hiring an unqualified, unsupervised driver that speeds to drive all day, every day, would probably cause injury or death. Texting, on opiates, and driving equals danger. We'll prove that. And LKQ, knowing this, they hired an unqualified driver, Chancellor McMillan, didn't safely supervise him, and the driver drives at speeds through construction zones. He speeds through construction zones, texting, speeding, on opiates, and driving. These are the facts of the case, and we're about to walk you through it in a cards-up presentation for your evaluation. Doing so is reckless disregard of the consequences of taking life. And we'll show you that. And it's not just our side, but the LKQ witnesses themselves testified it's reckless disregard. Let's start by reckless hiring in this case. We have to start with knowledge because it's all about punitive damages. And one of the elements that I just showed you is knowledge. What is LKQ's knowledge when hiring qualified, safe drivers? You can see on the visual aid, no terroristic act drivers, no illegal firearm drivers, no multiple felony convictions. And LKQ wants the profile of a safe driver. Let's see. Here's Chris Foster, your corporate representative for both LKQ and Keystone.
LKQ doesn't want its drivers committing terroristic acts. True?
Correct.
Okay. Fleet companies in general, they don't want drivers who are carrying illegal firearms.
That'd be correct.
Understand? Keystone does not want its drivers to have multiple felony convictions. True?
That's correct.
And if a driver, Keystone does not want drivers that have combinations of multiple felony convictions and driving violations. True?
To an extent, yes.
I mean, that could be a profile of a driver that Keystone doesn't want to hire.
That'd be a possibility, yes.
Okay.
And you'll notice throughout this presentation, we have given you the page and line number of every deposition. If you want to double check us in any form or fashion, we've given you the citation to do so. Here's part of LKQ's knowledge from the corporate representative. We already have the video deposition prepared for Chris Foster to play at trial. As you know, we'll play his video deposition. LKQ Corporation has a pre-employment criminal background check. LKQ has a pre-employment criminal background check policy directly on point here in this case that shows direct knowledge. This document alone is enough to get to punitive damages in this case. But we asked the manager of LKQ, Mitch Mosley, questions about this document so that he could show us the application of how LKQ practices hiring. And he walked us through it. Let's show you the cross-examination of Mitch Mosley at trial. It says, all background checks must be reviewed before a candidate commences employment with LKQ. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, is that a policy that you all follow at your location?
Yes.
And per the policy we just went over,
A criminal conviction, such as a felony conviction, could disqualify a potential hire. True?
Yes.
A felony conviction may disqualify a hire.
And as we just read, a criminal conviction, such as an assault and battery conviction, could disqualify a potential hire. True?
Yes.
Did the driver in this case have an assault and battery conviction that the manager just said would disqualify a driver?
And as we just read in the LKQ policy, a criminal conviction such as a firearms related conviction could disqualify a candidate, a potential hire. True?
Yes.
Did the driver in this case have a illegal firearms conviction?
Just reading this policy, it says that a potential hire with a felony conviction of assault could be the profile of a, look here, disqualified driver. True?
Yes.
Did the driver in this case have the profile of a disqualified, unsafe driver before LKQ Keystone hired him?
Do you want to hire drivers who have shown a history of using a firearm inappropriately?
No.
No. And of course, the policy walks through what Mitch Mosley just testified to. What's so important to know is you can put the policy up, but Mitch Mosley's testimony indicates the practices, how the policy is applied. And here's something that's so important about this policy. LKQ Corporate is the one that makes the ultimate decision to hire your drivers. And LKQ Corporate's the one, not locally, not Jonesboro. What's Mitch Mosley say more about this policy?
And if you have a driver that has multiple felony criminal convictions, then that's more likely to disqualify the driver, isn't it?
Correct.
Sure. As it says outside of 5 years will not be considered, but it says here the time that has passed since the offense or conduct. And so what this is telling us is that within 5 years, a felony conviction within 5 years will be considered. Right?
Correct, yes.
Did the driver in this case, were his felony convictions within 5 years of the date of the hire?
And so character references, those would be like references to the potential hire. True?
Yes.
So LKQ or Keystone would visit with character references of the potential hire. Fair?
Yes.
Look at the body language of Mr. Mosley.
Now, and it says here below, and I've got it highlighted, but when a potential hire has felony convictions mentioned specifically in this policy, the policy says that LKQ's Human Resources Department and its legal department will make the final decision on whether or not the candidate is qualified. True?
Yes.
And of course, what Mr. Mosley just testified to is in the policy. 5 years from the date of hire, what to do. If you have somebody, you need to do some background checks. Have they driven before? No safety, character references. Were these things done? What did LKQ Keystone know, or should have known, about Chancellor McMillan before choosing to hire him in reckless disregard of the circumstances? Let's look at his application for employment. Look at the date, June 27th, 2016. On one of the first pages of the application, Chancellor McMillan tells LKQ, I have a possession of a firearm felony, aggravated assault felony, terroristic act felony, and a criminal mischief misdemeanor. LKQ does a background check. Look who the customer is, LKQ Central. And in the background check, guilty, terroristic acts, aggravated assault, possesses a defaced firearm. 3 felonies. Look at the date. July 23rd, 2013. That's within 5 years of the date of hire. According to Mitch Mosley's testimony, we now have a disqualified driver. Also, what else showed in his background check? A moving violation. A moving violation in and by itself, not that big a deal. A moving violation in combination with 3 felony convictions? What about your driver? Here is Chancellor McMillan's arrest photograph for his terroristic act guilty, aggravated assault guilty, possessing a defaced firearm guilty, within your policy's disqualifying time criteria of 5 years. Now let's look at Mitch Mosley's testimony.
And you see that Chance McMillan had a felony conviction for aggravated assault. True?
Yes.
And aggravated assault is one of the felony convictions listed on LKQ's policy that may disqualify a driver. True?
Yes.
And you see that Chance McMillan has a felony conviction for possessing a defaced firearm. True?
Yes.
And that is a felony conviction that is a firearm-related conviction that is listed as one of the disqualifying convictions for LKQ's policy. True?
Yes.
Okay. And so, either way, LKQ Keystone knew that Chance McMillan had 3 felony convictions. They were within the 5 years of the date of his hire. True?
Yes.
New. The language in the testimony and the cross-examination parallels the jury instruction language of punitive damages in this case. And of course, as you've already seen, we've marked them as exhibits in multiple of the depositions, and I'm sure you all have reviewed those. Our visual aids are already in evidence. Here, terroristic act.
And so LKQ Keystone made a decision to hire Chance McMillan knowing his background check showed felony convictions. True?
Yes.
This is an important. LKQ Keystone knew about Chancellor McMillan's 3 criminal felony convictions and the type of those felony convictions before they chose to make a deliberate decision to hire him and put him behind the highway on the public. Aggravated assault.
So LKQ Keystone knew that Chance McMillan had 3 felony convictions, 1 for a terroristic act, 1 for aggravated assault, and 1 for the possession of a defaced firearm before LKQ Keystone chose to hire him. True?
Yes.
Possesses a defaced firearm. Now, while LKQ did know this information, did LKQ investigate? Did LKQ find out how did he get this defaced firearm conviction? What were the details of his assault and battery? Did they go down and get what we have shown you here on this document that we'll have blown up for the jury? The public file?
And LKQ decided to place Chance McMillan behind the wheel on public highways as a driver delivering auto parts. True?
Yes.
What did Chancellor McMillan do? Well, as I hope you know by now, you visited with Chancellor McMillan directly, I would hope, as I did. And now we've investigated, and we now know that Chancellor McMillan knew about an altercation, chose to get in his vehicle and drive to an apartment complex on campus at Arkansas State University in Jonesboro. He chose to take an illegal firearm into this apartment complex and got into a shootout with another individual, shooting at each other while people are sleeping in their apartments, while children are sleeping in their apartments, and while there were other people around. It's only by the grace of God that somebody wasn't killed by a bullet in this shootout that happened on campus. Also, as Chancellor McMillan has testified, and we have learned from other sources, Chancellor McMillan is forbidden from stepping on the campus of an Arkansas State University anywhere in the state of Arkansas for the rest of his life. Did LKQ Keystone take any steps to find out what their driver had done within the disqualifying time period of hiring? Well, did LKQ do any kind of reference check? Why would it be a good thing to do to check the references when hiring a driver?
Well, you'd be checking who the driver or the prospective employee put down in their application.
And what would you be looking for?
That individual's thoughts and recommendation.
Because this is where you want to get into what we talked about yesterday. Is this person the type of person we want to hire as a driver for our company? True?
True.
Have you ever talked to any of Chance McMillan's references about Chance McMillan?
No,
Do you know if anybody at LKQ or Keystone called any of his references?
I do not know that.
LKQ and Keystone's corporate representative went into great detail about how they want to hire drivers with morals and values, a safe-oriented driver, a driver that hadn't committed terroristic acts, a driver that doesn't carry illegal firearms, and on and on and on. Well, Chancellor McMillan listed 3 references. And as we've learned in our investigation, all 3 references knew about this shootout that happened on a college campus around other people. One of the references was an employee of LKQ Keystone at the time of Chancellor McMillan's hire. Let's see what happened here in the information that LKQ Keystone learned from Kalen Husky.
Whenever whenever they went through the process of hiring, because you're listed as a reference, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did LKQ Keystone or anyone there ask you about Chance McMillan's driving history?
No.
Did anyone at LKQ or Keystone ask you about Chance McMillan's his moving violations while driving? Ask you? Did anyone at LKQ or Keystone ask you about Chance McMillan's physical ability to do the job?
No.
Did anybody at LKQ or Keystone ask you about his mental ability, Chance's mental ability to do the job?
No.
Did anyone at LKQ or Keystone, when you're listed as a reference, did they ask you about anything about Chance McMillan's, has he ever been arrested before?
No.
Did anybody at LKQ or Keystone ask you if Chance McMillan ever had any felony convictions or anything like that?
No. On that, I did my homework and I looked it up and see that we do hire people who've been felons type thing, and we was on the list. So I felt like that right there's a chance for him to get a good job. I mean, I don't see why something like that on his record should stop him from getting a good job.
But so you knew that Chance had felony convictions?
Yeah, I know, but to me, that was like something, you throw it out the window. If a good person, that was good heart and good work ethic, then I don't look at the whatever you've done in your past, I'm looking at what you can do right now.
And so, since you knew that, before you recommended Chance to LKQ Keystone, you went and looked at their policy on that.
Mm-hmm.
And you saw where they would hire someone that has past felony convictions.
Yes.
Did I understand your testimony?
Correct.
Okay. Either way, LKQ or Keystone, they didn't ask you about
No.
whether or not Chance
No,
had any
they
felony convictions.
No, sir.
Did LKQ or Keystone ask you anything about whether or not Chance McMillan had any alcohol or drug use or anything like that? Did they ask you about it?
Because he don't do it, dabble, nothing like that. No. That I know him for the years I know, I never seen him use drugs or alcohol.
But did LKQ ask you about it?
No.
That's what you would have told them,
Yeah.
right? Did LKQ or Keystone ask you about Chance McMillan's integrity? Or did they ask anything about that?
No.
Did they ask you about his trustworthiness?
No.
Did LKQ or Keystone, anybody there, ask you about Chance McMillan, whether he owned a gun or didn't own a gun or anything like that?
No. No, sir.
Did LKQ or Keystone or anyone ask you anything about Chance McMillan before they hired him?
No.
Nothing.
No.
You see, it never dawned on me that as an employee, he's back there in the warehouse, that someone from LKQ Keystone wouldn't have walked into the back and done a reference check with one of their employees, or I would have asked that question at the beginning. Come to find out, LKQ Keystone never asked Mr. Husky a question, nothing, about Chancellor McMillan. Also, as we've learned from the other two references, no one from LKQ Keystone contacted the other reference checks. What else did LKQ know about Chancellor McMillan? Well, in his application file, he says he graduates from a college, ASU Jonesboro, with a computer science degree, completed 4 years. Did you graduate? Yes. What is the one thing of all of the questions about Chancellor McMillan's qualifications in the hiring process, what is the one thing that LKQ relies upon to say this one characteristic makes him a good hire?
Of course, you mentioned he went to college.
I do not know what courses he took in college, other
So
than his degree was computer science.
did he finish that degree?
Yes.
Is there anything in Chance McMillan's education that you would think would help qualify him as a driver?
Driver of, can you define driver?
The job he's applying for.
Sure. He has a college degree, which means that he can obviously handle day-to-day business. For the job he was being applied for, and he has a valid driver's license with a relatively clean, I would say, very decently clean record, with one violation 37 months prior to applying, that he was qualified for the position he was applying for.
According to LKQ Keystone, the one thing they could find in his file that qualified him for this job is that he has a college degree. And as Chris Foster, your representative, says, that tells him he can handle day-to-day business.
Your education, and we've already talked about Arkansas State, Arkansas Tech, haven't we?
Correct.
And if I read somewhere, I remember there's so many papers in this case, I've read them, but you got a degree, didn't you?
No.
You didn't get a degree?
No.
Okay. What were you going to college to get a degree in?
Computer science.
Can you share with us why you didn't go ahead and finish that and get that?
I actually got removed from school. What was it? May of 2013.
Yeah. He lied on his application. Chancellor McMillan lied on his application, and it was the one thing that your corporate representative said he could rely on that qualified him as a driver. this lie. Also, whenever LKQ corporate representative testifies that this lie is what told him he could handle day-to-day business, well, the reason he got kicked out of school, the reason he's caught in this lie, is because he gets into a shootout around people sleeping in their homes, their apartments. Let's look at the LKQ Keystone hiring chart. Great visual aid for the trial of this case to simplify this. And first, let's look at applicant profile. Let's look at the different characteristics that LKQ taught us is their knowledge of disqualified drivers, convicted felons, assault and battery convictions, terroristic threatening convictions, illegal defaced firearm convictions, moving violations, convictions within 5 years, lied on applications, reference checks, previous fleet job driving experience, and all of the above. As we walk through the facts, and I've shown you the testimony as it will be laid out in the cross-examination, these video clips are ready to pop during the cross-examination. LKQ Keystone's policies and practices. Well, what did you guys tell us? Your side told us that if you're a convicted felon, that's a red flag for hiring. Did Chancellor McMillan have felony convictions? Yes, he did. Now, what did your Mitch Mosley, LKQ, tell us if an applicant profile has assault and battery conviction? That's a disqualifying factor. Should not hire. Did Chancellor McMillan have that? Yes, he did. What about terroristic threatening conviction? LKQ told us that's a disqualifying factor. Should not hire. Did Mr. McMillan have that? Yes, he did. Illegal defaced firearm convictions. LKQ tells us, hey, this is a disqualifying event. Should not hire. Chancellor McMillan has a conviction for using an illegal defaced firearm to get into a shootout on a public campus. Moving violations. That's a red flag. Did Chancellor McMillan have that? Yes, he did. Convictions within 5 years. Should not hire. That's what LKQ tells us per their policies and practices. Chancellor McMillan's convictions are all within 5 years. If an applicant directly lies on an application, you should not hire that applicant. Chancellor McMillan lied on his application. References. Both the LKQ corporate representative and Mitch Mosley told us that you must check references. LKQ's policies and procedures say that you must check references. Did LKQ Keystone check any of Chancellor McMillan's references? No references were checked. Now, LKQ's policies and your corporate representative told us that they look to see if someone has all these red flags, all these felony convictions, and you still think you might want to hire this person because you need butts in the seat. You're going to look to see if they have previous driving experience with no safety. Did Chancellor McMillan have previous driving experience? None. What if a driver has all of the above? They have every one of them. Should not hire. Did Chancellor McMillan have all of the above? And did LKQ Keystone hire him anyway? That's reckless hiring. And look at the chart. Look at the Arkansas punitive damages chart. I just can't wait to try this case and show these visual aids to the jury as we do it in opening statement and we walk through each one of your witnesses, because we will prove this case through your witnesses. Reckless hiring, by the way, it's a foregone conclusion. How about reckless supervision? Reckless supervision we're dividing into two different categories. First, we're going to start with corporate speeding culture. What do we have here with the reckless supervision about speeding within your corporations?
All right. Basically, there are benefits to companies for supervising fleet drivers, true?
There are benefits to Keystone Automotive Industries to monitor our drivers, yes.
There are benefits to the public safety sector by supervising fleet drivers, true?
True.
And that's why fleet safety industry drivers are supervised, true?
True.
Knowledge, the first prong of punitive damages, and we just proved it. Okay. And so when you're monitoring the driver and the vehicle that the drivers are driving over a 12-month period, you can learn patterns of what we just listed. Violations, tickets, speeding, braking, things of that nature.
Of poor driving behaviors, yes.
Okay. And how is it helpful to monitor a driver over a period of time, such as 12 months or more?
You can identify areas of training that are needed to help correct those behaviors and make sure that they exhibit the safe practices that you want the organization to be seen for.
Fleet company drivers should be trained on driving safe speeds,
Correct.
driving speed limits,
Correct.
operation of a vehicle,
Yes.
keeping a vehicle under control,
Yes.
when to safely use cruise control,
Correct.
how to keep a proper lookout,
Correct.
how to use brakes safely, braking safely,
Correct.
general inspection of vehicles,
Yes.
how to operate the vehicle and what the rules are in school zones,
Yes.
how to operate the vehicle in crosswalks and around stoplights and intersections,
Yep.
how to operate the vehicle in construction zones.
Yes.
LKQ, Keystone, and Chancellor McMillan knew how they are supposed to handle a vehicle safely, how they're supposed to supervise their drivers safely, and that's why element 1 is proved now. LKQ Keystone knew. Chancellor McMillan knew. One reason that we're not pursuing a negligent training case or a reckless training case is because you knew. LKQ Keystone has this immaculate LKQ University that shows that you all have the corporate knowledge and that you gave the driver the knowledge how to operate safely, which is the first element of punitive damages. Let's take a look of what we've learned through the Geotab system about the reckless speeding culture of LKQ. Let's dive deeper into the facts of this case and what our jury will understand from what LKQ gave us as we take a look at the reckless speeding culture of your insured. LKQ Keystone's drivers exceeded the speed limit over 7,000 times between November 2016 and June of 2017. 7,000 times. LK Keystone knew its Geotab data shows a culture of speeding. Here we have each one of the burgundy bubbles, circles, represents 1,000 instances of speeding. We've overlaid the geographical because Geotab, LKQ's data, tells us exactly where the speeding violation occurred and how fast they're going. These are speeding over 10 miles an hour. So this is how many times it shows us the culture that LKQ allows their drivers, encourages their drivers to go 10 miles an hour or more over the speed limit. Why is that important? Why is it directly relevant in this case? What was the speed limit of Chancellor McMillan as he sped through the construction zone and killed Andy Hardesty? All the yellow dots are speeding less than 10 miles an hour. Look how small those are compared to the over 10 miles an hour. It's a great visual aid to let our jury understand the corporate recklessness here. The culture of this company: deliver as many auto parts as fast as you can, speed as much as you need to. Let's go deeper. LKQ Keystone's drivers exceeded the speed limit by 20 miles per hour or more and drove faster than 85 miles per hour 98 times between November 2016 and June 2017. What's so scary about this fact? It's something that your side has tried to make a big deal about, but it's great for us. This is on one vehicle out of your thousands upon thousands upon thousands of fleet vehicles. The data that we've shown you so far is on one vehicle, the vehicle that was driven to kill Andy Hardesty. Can you imagine the data and what this would look like if we collect the geotab data on every vehicle? Even if it's just every vehicle out of the Jonesboro warehouse. But what if we went to the other warehouses in Arkansas? You wouldn't be able to see the state. Here, we've broken it down for the jury. Speeding 20 miles per hour or more over the limit. That's in pink. Of course, that's the color that Geotab uses as it red flags it and sends a notice to corporate. And orange, 85 miles per hour over the speed limit. All over the northeast part of the state in southern Missouri. Let's break it down and look. Speeding violation, Oxford, Arkansas. Speed limit's 55 miles an hour. LKQ Keystone, 93 miles per hour. Ash Flat, Arkansas. Speed limit 55. LKQ Keystone's driver, 91 miles per hour. This is dangerous. Oil Trough, Arkansas, 35 miles per hour. LKQ driver, 65 miles per hour. Portia, Arkansas, speed limit 35. LKQ goes 65. That's reckless driving. Brooklyn, Arkansas, 60 miles an hour, but LKQ drivers go 99 miles per hour. That's almost 100 miles per hour. Jonesboro, Arkansas, speed limit of 70. LKQ's drivers, 98 miles per hour. And LKQ Keystone knows this information. Brooklyn, again, 60 miles an hour. Your drivers go 99 miles per hour. This is black and white hard evidence. Can't dispute it. Zenith, Missouri. Folks in Missouri, watch out when LKQ's coming down the road. 55 miles per hour, 93 if you're in an LKQ Keystone truck. Dexter, Missouri, 91 miles an hour in a 60 mile an hour zone. Silva, Missouri, 91 in a 55. Do you see a pattern? And of course, on May 17, 2017, Chancellor McMillan received speeding and DOT health card violations in Poplar Bluff, Missouri. LKQ is put on direct notice of Chancellor McMillan's speeding. What did they do? Nothing. LKQ Keystone knew about Chancellor McMillan's May 17, 2017 driving violations as evidenced by Mitch Mosley's signature. I'm about to show you that document. Mitch Mosley, the manager of your warehouse, signed off on it. If management would have evaluated the Geotab data, it would have seen the number of speeding violations happening every day. Every day. Look what I've just shown you. That's what you either saw or should have seen. The Geotab device was suspiciously removed from the vehicle that killed Andy Hardesty on June 7th of 2017. And as you know from the hard fast data, the computer data, Chancellor McMillan was traveling 65 miles per hour in a 55 mile an hour zone through a construction zone and killed Andrew Hardesty, which 10 miles an hour over, that is the culture that we were able to prove is the reckless speeding culture of LKQ. Here's the speeding violation that we just referenced in Missouri. You can see it's Chancellor McMillan. The date's May 17, 2017. There's the vehicle he's driving for LKQ. He gets a speeding violation 6 to 10 miles per hour over the speed limit. He's operating a property carrying vehicle without possessing a valid medical certificate. And here is direct knowledge, evidence, Thomas Mosley, the manager, and what's he write? LKQ / Keystone, May 31st, 2017. LKQ Keystone had direct knowledge that their driver is speeding at this point. Now, LKQ Keystone should have been supervising and monitoring their drivers from the date of hire and as long as they're driving as an employee. However, even if that's not happening in this case, the day that Chancellor McMillan gets the speeding violation and LKQ knows it, if LKQ had simply looked at the geotab data, it would have seen hundreds and hundreds of speeding violations on this driver and the truck involved in this crash and should have grounded the driver. Did that happen? Let's look at Chancellor McMillan's testimony when we asked him about some of this speeding.
So, you do remember Mr. Mosley visiting with you about these Missouri State Highway Patrol issues?
About the whole incident, yes.
And so, did Mr. Mosley visit with you about speeding 6 to 10 miles per hour over the speed limit?
Yes.
So, if your supervisor, Mr. Mosley, visited with you about speeding 6 to 10 miles per hour over the speed limit, he had to have known that you were speeding 6 to 10 miles an hour over the speed limit in May of 2017. True?
Correct.
And did Mr. Mosley visit with you about the fact that you were driving a vehicle that weighed over 10,000 pounds across state lines without the proper DOT certification?
Say it again.
Did Mr. Mosley, your supervisor at LKQ Keystone, visit with you about the fact that you were driving a vehicle across state lines that was over 10,000 pounds without a DOT certification, with a medical authorization?
Yes.
And so Mr. Mosley knew that you were driving across state lines without the proper certification?
Correct.
So even if you were forbidden from driving 65 miles an hour in a 55 mile an hour zone by your employer, I mean, if they told you, we're going to fire you if you drive 65 miles an hour in a 55 mile an hour zone, you would have done it anyway? Is that what you're telling us?
I'm not saying I would have done it anyway, but it's times to where you have to drive more than the speed limit.
That's the culture.
On like the day of the wreck, Chance, that's just a regular highway, you weren't passing, going down the road. Was it your understanding that LKQ Keystone, it was okay for you to have your cruise control set at 65 miles an hour in a 55 mile an hour zone?
I wouldn't say it was okay. I wouldn't know if it was okay.
LKQ Keystone didn't tell you it wasn't okay, right?
No.
They didn't tell you?
No.
Didn't tell. So here your driver did not know that it wasn't okay to go 10 miles an hour. Your driver didn't know that it was unsafe and dangerous and reckless to set the cruise control at 10 miles an hour. Why not? It's because we know from the geotab data that LKQ said just the opposite, that it is okay. It's encouraged. Over 7,000 times on one truck for LKQ. You said it was okay because over 7,000 times in a little less than a year, you have one truck that's going over 10 miles an hour. Now, if we look here, is Chancellor McMillan just the only one? Well, we got to visit with some of your other drivers at LKQ, and let's see what we learned and what our jury will hear through this testimony. Here is former driver Troy Brown.
So, do you remember telling her that you were expected to make somewhere around 30 to 40 deliveries in a day?
Yes.
That's a lot too.
Yeah.
How do you accomplish something like that?
Speed.
You speed?
Yeah. Work a lot of hours.
Speed.
How did LKQ and their drivers handle speeding?
I've seen a few drivers go over the speed limit. You know, I give you a good example of that. I was on the road doing 55 or 60, saw a truck come up behind me, and I thought, you know, the heck is that? And it was one of our truck drivers. So, you know, I think some of our truck drivers just didn't have the attitude or the, you know, integrity to do what was responsible.
Do you feel like LKQ management disciplined those people, or was that just part of the culture of getting things done at LKQ?
Object to the floor.
As far as I know, there wasn't any discipline going on.
Ms. Wyland mentioned the driver points. You said you thought you were pretty close.
Oh, yeah.
Why do you think you were pretty close?
Because I had a lot. I had 2 wrecks and probably 4 speeding tickets.
Those 4 speeding tickets, were those while you were working for LKQ?
Yeah, it was in the truck, yeah.
Did the managers at LKQ and Keystone know about these speeding tickets?
Yes.
Okay. And so at LKQ, was safety a number one concern in your opinion?
I've never seen that. Never.
And you said you had about 4?
Yeah, 3 or 4.
3 or 4. While driving Keystone LKQ vehicle.
Yeah.
What happened after each of those?
I would just get talked to about it.
I think you told me before they knew you had the speed to get the job done, right?
Yeah.
I'm Andy Nettles. I used to work for LKQ. The company insisted that you make deliveries, you know, as fast as you can. We had a lot to do during the day. Load the truck, turn in your money, and get on after 2 hours of loading. Work for another 10, 12 hours. Speeding was another thing. Give you another story. I was head to Poplar Bluff and saw a truck coming up behind me pretty quick. And he passing me doing over 70, and it was one of our drivers. So I run into him at the gas station, asking what the hell he's doing. He said, "Hey, I got a lot to do, got to get it done." He said, "I want to get home."
When we look at LKQ's reckless speeding culture, this particular testimony, I don't think anybody can overcome it on your side.
When you worked for LKQ Keystone, did you get the feeling from management that they would rather you speed and get the job done than slow down and not make your deliveries?
Object to the floor.
Yes.
Let's look at that testimony. Management would rather you speed and get the job done than slow down and not make your deliveries. Yes. This is a culture that is reckless, that demands punitive damages to correct it, to make our public highways safe. That's not me talking. That's hundreds of jurors we've tested this case on. We'll show you our jury research, some of it, in just a moment. Let's go to reckless supervision. Opiates. LKQ Keystone knew driving and prescription drugs can be a dangerous combination. Here's your corporate representative.
So to break that down, fleet drivers cannot use a prescription drug if it impacts that driver's ability to drive safely.
Correct.
Fleet drivers cannot use a prescription drug if it impacts that driver's ability to safely operate vehicles around other folks on the road. True?
True.
That'd be wrong, wouldn't it?
Yes.
That'd be dangerous.
Correct.
And some examples. Driving under the influence of opiates could cause a safety risk to the public. True?
True.
Driving under the influence of opiates could cause dizziness or drowsiness. True?
True.
Driving under the influence of pain medication could cause safety risk to the public. True?
Good.
Dizziness or drowsiness or delayed reaction time or anything like that can be very unsafe behind the wheel.
That's correct.
If a driver is taking any kind of medication that can cause blurred vision, confusion, dizziness, faintness, or lightheadedness, that could be a hazard. That could be a safety risk. True?
It could be.
And you don't want those type of folks behind the wheel, right?
That's correct.
That could be very dangerous.
That could be very dangerous.
It can cause wrecks, right?
It could.
If a driver has unusual tiredness or weakness because of a medication, we don't need them behind the wheel. True?
True.
Knowledge element is proven. You see, if you listen to the testimony very clearly, is if they're taking the drug, they shouldn't be behind the wheel. If they're taking a drug that could cause these things, they should not be behind the wheel. And LKQ Keystone knows it. And that's LKQ Keystone's language. And LKQ knows what should happen. Here's your witness.
Employees, drivers are required to disclose any medications or substances that could possibly make them a risk of harm to themselves or others in performing their job duties. True?
True.
Basically, drivers must tell the company about any medications that they're taking that might make them a safety risk to themselves or the public. True?
That's correct.
Why?
Because we would have to identify a different form of work for that time, or possibly, during that time of the prescription, or possibly remove them from the road completely, based on the recommendation of a physician.
Well, what drugs were your insured drivers on? One of them is lisinopril. And you see the side effects for lisinopril. Let's walk through what LKQ tells us about one of the drugs your driver's on the week before he kills Andy Hardesty.
And we talked a lot yesterday, but if in fact Chance McMillan is taking this drug, lisinopril, and having any of these side effects, then LKQ or Keystone, they would not want him operating a vehicle, would not want him behind the wheel. True?
We would not want, Keystone would not want a individual on prescription drugs that are prohibited from operating to be behind the vehicle, correct?
Yeah.
You notice how his answer, if he's taking a prescription drug that has a warning about operating a vehicle, LKQ doesn't want him behind the wheel. That's what your testimony is.
Yeah. And if at all possible, you would want one of the supervisors at Keystone to know whether or not one of their drivers, Chance McMillan, is taking medications that could cause blurred vision, confusion, dizziness, faintness, lightheadedness, tiredness. True?
It is our driver's responsibility to notify their supervisor should they be taking any medication that's going to impair their ability to drive.
This is information that the supervisor at Keystone want to know.
Correct.
Why?
To remove them from the position during the time they are taking that inhibiting drug.
Because we don't want that driver on the road delivering auto parts when they're under a medication that impairs them. True?
When they're under impairment, yes.
Look at the side effects of the lisinopril alone. Did LKQ or Keystone find out if Chance McMillan was going to the doctor for any health issues?
To my knowledge, Chance did not tell us he was going to the doctor for health issues.
Is that true? Did LKQ or Keystone know that Chance McMillan was taking the drug lisinopril once a day starting July 5th, 2017, 1 week before the wreck in this case?
To my knowledge, Mr. McMillan did not disclose this to his supervisor.
Well, here is Chancellor McMillan's medical record. July 5th, 2017, exactly 7 days before Andy Hardesty is killed. Headaches for several days. His headaches are so significant because of the high blood pressure. He's prescribed lisinopril daily and Norco 5-325, which is an opiate, for pain. And his diagnosis is high blood pressure. Norco is hydrocodone, which is an opiate, and it comes with the warning about driving. Drowsiness, dizziness, lightheadedness, fuzzy thinking, on and on. What's Mitch Mosley, LKQ Keystone's manager, have to say about it? Did Chance McMillan visit with you about having to go to doctors? Medical appointments?
No. Did Chance ever tell you that he was taking medications?
Not that I remember, no. He never did.
Now let me ask you this. You think that LKQ Keystone made it very clear to Chance McMillan that if he starts taking prescription medications that he's supposed to tell one of his bosses?
Yes.
So LKQ believes that they made it very clear to Chancellor McMillan, if you start taking medications, you tell one of our bosses. Here's what we know. LKQ Keystone's driver started taking Norco, a narcotic pain medication, and lisinopril for high blood pressure medications on July 5th, 2017, and the days leading up to the wreck on July 12th, 2017. We also, since Mr. McMillan's deposition, have learned he was also taking another opiate called tramadol.
So I want to break that down, okay? It's my understanding that you took the lisinopril, the blood pressure medicine, starting every morning as prescribed by the doctor. Is that true?
Correct.
And you would have been taking that every day leading up to even when the wreck happened.
Correct.
And the Norco, the pain medication, you only took as needed when you needed it, right?
Correct. Yes.
And would that be whenever you were having a headache or in pain?
Yes. Mainly a headache, in which I will only get them at certain times of the day or the night, actually.
So if you would get a headache, you would take the Norco.
Correct.
And had you taken Norco how many times before, from the time it was prescribed until the wreck started, do you know?
I don't.
Could have been every evening you had a headache, or could have been every other evening. It could have been, we don't know.
It could have been vast. It's vast spread. Could have been, I took it one day, I want to take it again the next 3 days.
Or you may have to take it a couple days in a row, depending upon what the pain was.
Correct.
And that would have been in the period of time leading up to the wreck, true?
Correct.
Now,
Did LKQ Keystone supervisors know their driver started taking prescription drugs with unsafe driving side effects and having health issues? Well, let's see what your driver said.
in the period of time leading up to this wreck, you were only taking lisinopril as prescribed and pain medications as needed.
Correct.
And you communicated these medications and your health issues to your supervisors at LK Keystone before the wreck.
Correct.
Who's lying? From our side, preparing to try this case, who's lying? We know it's one of LKQ Keystone's employees. It's either Mitch Mosley or your driver, Chancellor McMillan. But according to Chancellor McMillan, his testimony is very clear. He told his supervisor, Mitch Mosley, about taking prescription drugs the week before Andy Hardesty's killed and having health issues.
Okay? If I understand your testimony, if I understand you correctly, nobody at LKQ Keystone ever told you or taught you that you were supposed to, that if you started taking prescription medications, you were supposed to tell your supervisor right away. You weren't told that.
No.
However, you used your common sense. I mean, you just, your own knowledge. And you did tell Mitch Mosley about going to the doctor.
Correct.
And if I understand your testimony correctly, you told Mitch Mosley about your headaches from your high blood pressure.
Correct.
And you told Mitch Mosley about how the doctor gave you prescription medications.
Correct.
Did you tell Mr. Mosley? Oh, he was a manager there at LKQ Keystone, wasn't he?
Correct.
And we're talking about right there at that kind of 1st of July before this wreck happened, right?
Correct.
Another lie. You see, Chancellor McMillan says nobody ever told him to let supervision know about taking drugs, but Mitch Mosley said the opposite. Has your side done the jury research and played these video depositions for the jury? Has your side learned which one of these of your employees will the jury believe? We have. And why is this so important? You have a driver now who's speeding, who's on opiates, 2 opiates, on lisinopril, 3 drugs that have warnings against driving, that cause dizziness, dazed, fuzzy thinking, driving from Jonesboro, Arkansas, south.
Your own words, would you tell us how the wreck happened?
I don't remember. I don't remember anything about the wreck how the wreck happened or the events while the wreck happened. I don't remember. I remember after, and I remember slightly before. The only thing I remember coming before the wreck is coming out of Cherry Valley and setting my cruise.
And that is in Cherry Valley. You had to slow down in Cherry Valley.
Correct.
And then you came out of Cherry Valley and you remember setting your cruise control.
Correct.
And we did the computer download on your vehicle, and we know that it was set on 65. Is that correct?
Yes.
So it's my understanding that when you left Cherry Valley, you set the cruise control on 65 miles per hour. Is that true?
Correct.
And that's the last thing you remember.
Correct.
And you don't remember anything from the time period that you left Cherry Valley and put the cruise control on 65 until after the wreck happened.
Correct.
What caused your insured's driver to black out? He has no memory at all. He remembers intentionally setting the cruise control 10 miles an hour over the speed limit and then blacks out. Doesn't remember. He remembers taking the opiates. He remembers taking the lisinopril, but he blacks out. Has no memory whatsoever. Doesn't remember the construction zone signs. Doesn't remember the 18-wheeler sitting still. He doesn't remember the flagger. He doesn't remember Andy Hardesty's vehicle. According to his testimony on this day, Well, as you know, the Arkansas State Crime Lab tested his blood, and tramadol was tested present. Why is that important? Well, let's look and see and listen to the language from LKQ Keystone directly. And we've seen the medical records now, when he's prescribed, and then we see what's been marked as Keystone 00022. We'll mark as Deposition Exhibit 74, where after the wreck, the Arkansas State Crime Lab found that Chance McMillan tested positive for lidocaine and tramadol. Is that correct?
I don't see that result on here.
That's down there at the bottom. I can highlight it.
Okay.
All right, you do see that, Chris?
I see where it was present in the toxicology.
Okay. And so, if it's present in the toxicology, and we know he's been prescribed the drugs, then it looks like it may have been in his system at the time he was driving. True?
It looks that way.
And if that's the case, Chance McMillan did not need to be behind the wheel of a Keystone truck delivering auto parts on July 12, 2017. True?
If it was in his system, we would have advised him not to be in the vehicle.
Quote, if it was in his system, we would advise him not to be in the vehicle. Corporate representative for LKQ Keystone, binding testimony on both corporations, because you had one individual binding both corporations at the same time. Well, we know it's in his system. But LKQ Keystone, the defense in this side, hired an expert, a toxicologist, Dr. Simmons, who took this point and drove it all the way home to ensure punitive damages certainty in this case. Page 37 of Dr. Simmons' deposition. Keep in mind, here is what LKQ Keystone corporate representatives have already testified under oath, and with certainty this video clip will be played to the jury. If opiates were in McMillan's system, we, LKQ Keystone, would not allow him to drive. So, in the Arkansas State Crime Lab, which we'll mark as Exhibit 2, Keystone 22, where Chancellor McMillan tested positive for opiates. If I understand your testimony, that simply tells us that opiates were in his system.
It does. It tells you that one or more opiates that could be detected at the limits of detection by that screening test were present there.
So we can be 100% certain opiates are in Chancellor McMillan's system at the time of the crash, per your own expert, per the evidence and documentation in this case, per the testimony of Chancellor McMillan. Combine that with LKQ Keystone's corporate representative testimony. If it's in his system, he shouldn't be behind the wheel. Chancellor McMillan never should have been behind the wheel. This wreck never should have happened. It was completely preventable. Now, Dr. Simmons, the defense's toxicologist, goes further. As I'm sure you've reviewed in this case, as you all have been discussing the exposure, getting ready for negotiations, Dr. Hank Simmons on Exhibit 3 says opiates in McMillan's system on July 12, 2017 McMillan took opioids compatible with the night before the wreck. The night before.
I understand your testimony correctly, though. You opine and believe that Chancellor McMillan took an opiate the night before the wreck. True?
I'm just telling you that this is consistent with that. All I can tell you is, just doing it independently and looking at what I can divine from looking at this material about the levels, that's consistent with him having taken, a tramadol, a 50 milligram tramadol the night before.
The defense toxicologist, Dr. Simmons, went even further for our case. On Exhibit 4, the week before Andy was killed, on July 12, 2017, LKQ Keystone's driver, McMillan, took opioids, Norco and Tramadol, and lisinopril, based upon his deposition and the lab results for Tramadol, signed by your expert, Dr. Henry Simmons.
If we combine your opinions with what you review here in the case with Chancellor McMillan's testimony, the week before Andy was killed on July 12, 2017, LKQ Keystone's driver, McMillan, took opioids, Norco and Tramadol, and lisinopril. True?
Object to the form.
As I recall his deposition, that would be consistent. And certainly the tramadol was supported by the data, that the Tox lab found, at the crime lab.
Mark this Exhibit 4. Would you sign your name at the bottom of that, please, Dr. Simmons? After you read it.
I'm going to add to it based upon his deposition.
Yes, sir. And lab results.
And lab results in the case of tramadol.
All right, so let's read this out loud and I'll ask you to sign it. The week before Andy was killed, on July 12, 2017, LKQ Keystone's driver, McMillan, took opioids, Norco and Tramadol, and lisinopril based upon his deposition and lab results for Tramadol. Would you sign that, sir?
That's recklessness.
And if you had known Chance McMillan was on multiple medications that had the potential to make him an unsafe driver, you would have taken steps to keep him off the road until he was proven safe. True?
I would have reported that to my supervisor, to my boss.
And you would have expected somebody at LK Keystone to keep him off the road until he was proven safe. True?
Object to the form.
Yes.
And the debacle that your side is in is that Chancellor McMillan testified he did tell the man that's on the screen right now, Mitch Mosley, about his health issues and his drugs, and nothing happened. So your side in trying this case is in quite the predicament. Do you go after and try to say Chancellor McMillan is lying? Of course, that creates a lot of problems for you about cell phones and opiates and all kinds of things. Or do you take the hit and say LKQ knew about the opiate use and did nothing about it? We look forward to trying that case, and of course, the jury will decide. Our jury research has indicated which one they believe.
Well, let's run through some scenarios. If Chance McMillan fell asleep behind the wheel, and that's why he didn't see anything, that's reckless driving, isn't it?
Object to the
Could
floor.
possibly be reckless driving.
If he's got, kind of like we talked about yesterday, he's got his eyes open, but he's just so dazed or out of it that he's fatigued and not able to really see what's in front of him, that's reckless driving, isn't it?
Object to the
It's
floor.
possibly reckless driving.
That's reckless driving.
So it's possible that on the evening of July 11th, the day before Andy got killed, he takes a tramadol, and the day before, on July 10th, he takes the Norco.
I can't exclude that as a possibility. There's data, to support the issue with the tramadol and the night before, as we've gone over.
Now, is speeding through a construction zone, hitting and killing someone, that's dangerous driving?
Object to the form.
I would certainly say so.
So, those are our two choices. Either intentionally killing Andy Hardesty and driving into him, or not seeing what's in front of him.
Object to
True.
the form.
Those are the two most obvious scenarios.
So in this case, the facts are is that LKQ Keystone's driver, the week before Andy Hardesty is killed, is taking Norco, Tramadol, and lisinopril, and on July 12th, speeds into a construction zone and kills Andy Hardesty. Those are the facts, you understand?
Object to the form.
I understand that those are part of the story.
From the defense's toxicologist, from the defense's expert in this case, that meets the elements of punitive damages in Arkansas by leaps and bounds. If you look at the testimony that we've just walked through, every element has been proved more than clear and convincing. So as we've walked through here, we have shown the folks here evaluating the situation, LK and Keystone are one and the same. We've shown that LKQ and Keystone recklessly hired Chancellor McMillan. Never should have been hired. This wreck never would have happened. That LK Keystone recklessly supervised their drivers, including Chancellor McMillan, by having an unsafe speeding culture. That LKQ Keystone recklessly supervised their drivers when it comes to opiate use and driving. And now we're going to move into reckless texting and driving. This is a combination for death. When you add up all the facts of this case and all the different culpable facts, it adds up to someone's going to die. Someone was going to die that day. Who was it going to be? We got to start with knowledge. Element number one. Does Keystone know how dangerous texting and driving is?
How do you define it in your world of safety? Reckless driving.
I would define it as knowingly acting in a way that puts other people at risk or danger.
Okay. By your definition, texting and driving knowingly puts people at risk and danger. That's reckless, isn't it?
Yes.
Texting and driving recklessly puts people in danger. LKQ Keystone's testimony.
If he is using a cell phone that's got his eyes off in front, not in front of him, whatever he's doing on a cell phone, if he's texting or emailing or Facebook, it doesn't matter.
He's using his cell phone, but he doesn't see what's in front of him. Doesn't see the construction zone. Doesn't see the vehicles in front of him. That's reckless driving, isn't it?
That's one.
It's a possibility.
That's a possibility of reckless driving, isn't it?
It's a possibility.
And of course, we know for certain that Chancellor McMillan is texting while driving, which by LKQ's own testimony is reckless disregard for the public. And you can see here, this is based on his Sprint cell phone records. He has 2 text messages outgoing at 9:59 a.m. and at 10:08 a.m. We know he's got a text message conversation going back and forth. We believe that's with his girlfriend. And then he has a new text messaging conversation that starts while he's driving an LKQ truck at 10:08 in the morning. We can overlay these times. If you remember these times, we can overlay these times with the GPS data so that we can be certain that while he's driving on Highway 1, this straight stretch from Jonesboro, Arkansas down toward Forest City, Arkansas, that Chancellor McMillan, while operating a vehicle, speeding, is also texting while on opiates and lisinopril. So if we plug that in, we can say we know from the GPS data that he leaves Jonesboro on Arkansas Highway 1 South at 9:55 a.m. He travels 34 miles south until the collision. He's texting while driving at 9:59 a.m. He's texting while driving at 10:08 a.m. The wreck is shortly before 10:30 a.m. What else? Well, from the information we've been able to collect, and we're going to collect more information from his cell phone. Your side has kept us from doing a proper analysis of his cell phone, but from the information we've been able to collect, we also know, on top of the 2 text messages in the Sprint cell phone records, that Chancellor McMillan sent 3 iMessages, cell phone, Apple phone to Apple phone, while driving. Here we have a driver from Jonesboro to the crash sends 5 separate messages on a cell phone while driving. He is texting while driving. He's recklessly reading text messages while driving. He's texting. He's on opiates. He's speeding. It equals death. One thing we can be certain of is Chancellor McMillan is using his cell phone while driving. What was LKQ Keystone's driver doing moments before this wreck? Was he in an opiate daze? Was he out of his mind? Did he fall asleep? Did he just black out? Was he on his cell phone? What was he doing? Reckless speeding through a construction zone. We know the speed limit is 55 miles an hour from the police report. We know from the computer download, where all parties were participating, that he was traveling 65 miles an hour with his cruise control active. We know that Chancellor McMillan never hit the brakes. From the computer download, he never applies the brakes. He never saw. We know that Andy Hardesty is sitting still at 0 miles per hour for 7 seconds. We know that Andy Hardesty has his brake on for those 7 seconds. Brake lights were lit. And we deposed the construction zone workers. Look and see and listen and hear about the reckless facts of this case. We have the construction zone superintendent, Lilburn Moreland. We have the construction flagman that was holding the flag, Randall Hicks. Another construction worker, Kyle Jones.
As they reflected approximately the day of the wreck. This is not to scale.
There's going to be 6. There's supposed to be 6 of them. and they're supposed to be 100 foot, no more than 100 foot.
Now, how far is the flag warning sign in front of the flagger?
1/10, 500 feet.
And then how far is the one lane road ahead or the be prepared to stop sign in front of the flag warning sign?
1/10, 500 feet.
And then how far is the road work ahead in front of the one lane road or be prepared?
1/10, 500 feet.
Okay, can you write that then? What, 500 feet, 500 feet, 500 feet? And is this how you set it up on the day of the wreck, July 12, 2017?
Yes, sir.
And were you following the law that required a 1,500 feet advance notice of the highway work zone?
Yes.
And was it set up the same way on the other end of this work zone?
Yes.
Now, the three vehicles in front of the LKQ trucks that safely came to a stop in front of you, did you see them? Did they come up and make a controlled stop?
Yes.
You didn't feel in peril or anything? Nobody rushed up on you and hit the brakes all of a sudden?
No.
The three vehicles in front of the LKQ truck, none of them rushed up in front of you?
No.
And disregarding these warning signs, if there's a construction zone ahead and not slowing down and stopping, that's dangerous, isn't it? Very. And that danger and that disregard, as we know in this case, can lead to death or injury. With the way that you set up, and we have it out here on Exhibit 1, the warning signs, there's a construction zone ahead. In order for a driver to not slow down and stop and run into stopped vehicles, would that driver have to disregard these warning signs?
Object to the point.
Yes.
Would disregarding these warning signs
What you're saying, when you say disregard,
ignore
just ignore them, yes.
And is disregarding or ignoring these warning signs going to put somebody in danger?
Yes.
Object to,
And is that common knowledge?
object to the point.
Yes.
Is that foreseeable that if I ignore these warning signs, I'm going to hurt somebody?
Yes.
Object to the point.
And do you believe that consciously disregarding these warning signs, not slowing down and stop, and hitting and striking somebody in a construction zone, that is recklessly putting somebody's life in danger?
Object
Yes.
to the point.
And is that what happened here?
Yes.
Recklessly putting someone's life in danger. And is that what happened here? Yes. Why did your insurance driver not slow down, not stop? Why did he not see, or did he just totally ignore this construction zone?
Okay. So I'm trying to get a feel from you, and I think that's the direction you said you were looking right before the impact happened, is down. If the 18-wheeler had not been there, if those three vehicles had not been in front of the LKQ truck, what would have been the next thing in that lane of traffic?
That would be me.
Be you.
Yes.
Somebody was going to die that day.
And if the car that was right in front of your flagger, Mr. Hicks, and the 18-wheeler that was right behind it, and then Mr. Hardesty and his Nissan, if this is the LKQ truck coming down the road, if these vehicles hadn't have been here, what's the first thing that he would hit?
He probably, if he didn't run, he'd have been dead.
I'm sorry. I didn't hear you.
If the flagger didn't see him or didn't run, he would be dead, because he'd run smooth over him. And then, just so happened we was far enough back, that's why we keep the 495 feet buffer zone, to keep us safe as well.
And that's dangerous driving, isn't it?
Yes.
Object to the
That's
point.
reckless driving.
Object to
Yes.
the point.
Now, using your terms, how would you describe the driving of the LKQ truck going through this construction work zone?
Very reckless. I mean, just like you said, he didn't even acknowledge the signs, or never saw them, or whatever. Just reckless.
Just reckless. From every perspective, from every angle, from each witness, it's just reckless. This is clear and convincing punitive exposure. And you're dealing with LKQ. Can you see this vehicle?
Can you tell us what happened from your viewpoint on the day of the wreck that led up to the wreck where Mr. Hardesty lost his life?
As to,
Just from what you were doing, from what you saw, I want to just turn it over and let you tell what you saw that day and what you understand.
okay, well, I came into a construction zone. I stopped, just sitting there waiting on the flagman to let us go, and all of a sudden, something hit me from the rear. I had to struggle to miss the car in front of me that pushed me, and there was a car in front of me with a lady and 2 children in the back of the car, and I managed to somehow miss the car. Basically, that's what happened. That's all I know.
This is Donna Jo Ferguson, the driver of the 18-wheeler. It had the shiny back on it for Helena Chemical Company that Andy Hardesty was sitting right behind, and there was another vehicle in front of that had a mother and several children in the back.
Were you able to safely see the construction zone warning signs?
Yes.
Were you able to see the construction zone signs and slow your 18-wheeler down safely?
Yes.
And were you able to see the construction zone warning signs and the flags and safely bring your vehicle to a controlled stop?
Yes.
Of course, we're going to have to play her video or bring her to the stand to talk about how easy it was to see this construction zone. Must have been very distracted or impaired.
And so, is what we see on Exhibit 2 on the day of the wreck, if I understand you correctly, if someone would have been looking ahead of them, driving down the road, coming up on this 18-wheeler sitting in the construction zone, there would have been brake lights lit, reflective tape, and the shiny rear end of this 18-wheeler. Is that fair?
I can answer that
Yes,
question
sir.
if you know.
And if a driver is speeding through a construction zone and hits and kills somebody who's stopped in the construction zone, that's reckless driving, isn't it, man? What about your knowledge from driving out on the road all these years? I mean, is that something that you know? It is, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes, it is. And this is what happens.
You admit that you never hit the brakes.
Correct.
You admit that you hit Mr. Hardy's vehicle at 65 miles per hour.
Correct.
And you admit that you had the cruise control set at 65 miles an hour, rear-ended Mr. Hardesty, and it was that wreck that took his life.
Correct.
If you had seen the 18-wheeler that was stopped in the construction zone in front of you, you would have slowed down. True?
Correct.
If you had seen the 18-wheeler stopped in front of you in the construction zone at a stop, and Mr. Hardesty's vehicle behind it, you would have slowed down and brought your vehicle to a stop without hitting Mr. Hardesty. True?
Say it again.
Madam Court Reporter, would you repeat my question?
If you had seen the 18-wheeler stopped in front of you in the construction zone at a stop and Mr. Hardy's vehicle behind it, you would have slowed down and brought your vehicle to a stop without hitting Mr. Hardesty. True?
Correct.
So, fleet drivers must be able to see construction zones and slow down if need be. True?
True.
Fleet drivers must be able to see construction zones and slow down and stop if need be. True?
True.
If a driver does not see a construction zone and speeds into a construction zone without slowing down or stopping, that can hurt and kill someone. True?
That is a possibility.
That's dangerous driving, isn't it?
That would be dangerous driving.
Okay. And per your definition, that's reckless driving, isn't it?
That could be, that could be reckless driving, yes.
That's reckless driving. I hope you can see how our firm's trial team has the ability to put together evidence in a flowing story so that it is organized, it is simplified. We are able to take the visual aids and simplify it so the jury can easily understand it and put together this punitive damages story so that we will receive, on behalf of our clients, a historic verdict.
So, if we walk through, if the cruise control is at 65 miles per hour and the speed limit is 55 miles an hour, that's intentional speeding. You said yes.
Correct.
Okay. Then I said, if an LKQ or Keystone driver is driving at a cruise control of 65 miles per hour and a speed limit of 55 miles an hour, and you're in a construction zone, that would be intentionally speeding in a construction zone. True?
True.
Per LKQ Keystone, this is an intentional speeding through a construction zone case. And if we go back to our Arkansas punitive damages chart, we have proved every element by more than clear and convincing evidence per each category of this case. Punitive damages. Now, one thing that's very powerful about this particular case that we don't see very often, we don't work cases that have this much culpability, this much corporate corruption, is you have all of the different categories. Reckless hiring. If he hadn't have hired him, this wouldn't have happened. We've got reckless supervision with this speeding culture. If we're not speeding, oh my goodness, would this have happened? We've got reckless supervision of opiates. If he's not on opiates, would this have happened? If he's not, we got reckless texting and driving. We know he's using his cell phone. Oh my goodness, would this have happened? We have recklessly, intentionally speeding through a construction zone. But the combination is something that we don't see. We work cases involving texting or speeding or bad hiring. But this combination, this level of culpability is unfathomable, and it cannot be tolerated. Now, when we look at punitive damages in this case, Arkansas allows for, in the second phase, the financial net worth of the company. What will our jury hear about LKQ's revenue from our expert, Bruce Engstrom? $12.47 billion? $7.85 billion? These are the numbers you can anticipate and evaluate that the jury's going to hear before they return their verdict in this case.
It's just clear to me that he had to know that he was in a construction zone area.
Yeah, but it's clear to me that the company had an opportunity to see who was driving the truck when on days where there were hundreds of speeding violations.
It's clear to me that he is impaired, not looking, or he's intentionally done this. Not a matter of just thinking about something or what I'm going to eat tonight.
It's clear to me that's not what was needed for Mr. McMillian to know that he needed to come to a stop.
It's clear to me is that he's taking two brand new prescriptions, one of which is an opioid, and he blows right through warning signs and commits this horrible crash, either because he's looking and not seeing and reacting, or he is not looking because he's impaired some way, either through the drugs or through his texting.
It's clear to me that the crash happened for one of two reasons. He either saw the signage, saw the vehicle stop, didn't care, and just plowed into the vehicles, or he didn't see them.
It's clear to me from the evidence of what we've gone over here so far about him being in the construction zone, having it on cruise, being over the speed limit, not hitting his brakes, and him having the kind of reckless attitude that he's willing to do it going down the roadway. And we can go back as far as you want to go and look on other days. This is a pattern. It is his pattern in practice to do this. And the company knew that, or they should have known that. But it's clear to me that for him to do what he did and how this crash occurred, he's texting. He's either typing or looking, because he's not looking at the target. I'm convinced he did not see them because he wasn't looking, or he was so impaired he didn't appreciate what he was looking at. That's clear to me. And in my view, it's clear to me he wouldn't be driving at all taking opioids, not in this day and time, about what we know about opioids. It's just clear to me that he had to know that he was in a construction zone area. Considering all the evidence, it seems to be clear to me that if you don't know what's happened and you've gone into this construction zone and you got all these stopped vehicles and you got it on cruise and never hit your brakes, I think it can easily be described as blacking out. You cannot willingly, and it's clear to me, they have willingly allowed this to go on by either looking and ignoring or having this evidence so clear and available to them, they do nothing about it. It is simply window dressing safety.
Let's take a look at a few of LKQ's alleged defenses in this case. One of LKQ's alleged defense is the brain injury. A brain injury caused his blackout. That somehow in this wreck, Chancellor McMillan received a brain injury that caused him not to remember from Cherry Valley on. That somehow when he remembers intentionally setting the cruise control on 65 miles an hour, and then he doesn't remember anything after that, that's somehow caused by an alleged brain injury. Well, let's look at the testimony from your expert, your side hired and paid for the expert in this case. See what he says. And then, of course, let's look at the medical records and the facts in this case about this alleged defense. And, of course, if we get done here and it creates some doubt in your mind about whether or not a brain injury caused the blackout, what's the other reason? What are we left with on why Chancellor McMillan doesn't remember and didn't see the construction zone? Maybe opiates? Maybe cell phone use? But wait a minute, let's see what happens. Here is Dr. Hank Simmons, the defense's toxicologist from the defense.
It would be speculation for you to say that his closed head injury is what caused him to not remember the details of the wreck.
Right.
Speculation. But he goes further.
It would be speculation if I told you that he had a closed head injury that caused him not to be able to remember the wreck.
He just kept saying it. The defense's expert kept saying it's speculation. Of course, you all know that means inadmissible. That means it's inadmissible. No jury will ever hear that a brain injury is what caused Chancellor McMillan not to remember because of your side's testimony. And of course, we have to look at the medical records. That's one reason in the cross-examination of Dr. Simmons, it was so much fun because he relied on the medical records and he clearly didn't know them as well as we did. Because in the medical records, The very first AirEvac Life Team, the first folks, patient, that's Mr. McMillan, reported speed of event was approximately 60 miles per hour. That's pretty good memory, with full recall of the event. Patient, Mr. McMillan, denied loss of consciousness. Somebody's lying. What else? We'll be able to use this to cross-examine your experts, use it to cross-examine Chancellor McMillan, and show it wasn't a brain injury is why he doesn't remember. It must be something else. Soft tissue injury only. No acute intracranial findings. Negative for loss of consciousness. The medical records are clear. And of course, his memory is very clear with the police. He puts in his police report, Highway South cruise control set on 60 miles per hour behind a vehicle traveling in front for approximately 5 miles. All of a sudden, the vehicle in front hits his brakes. Chancellor McMillan tries to blame Andy Hardesty for Andy's own death in the police report. Chancellor McMillan somehow remembers that Mr. Hardesty's vehicle comes to a sudden stop, which we know is a bold-faced lie. Wow. It just gets worse for the evaluation. I was with no other possible options but to hit the vehicle in front of me. Another lie. That defense is out. Let's take a look at the next alleged defense. What has been LKQ Keystone's tactic in this case?
Did you understand that if you filed a lawsuit, you would have to go through this type of interrogation? Did you understand by not trying to resolve the case before now that you would be subjected to a deposition? What were your thoughts about the settlement offer that we made to resolve this case?
Ridiculous.
What do you think is not ridiculous? There's a $10,000 check from you. Why did you write that check? Another check written from you, a check from your husband.
They were a gift.
What kind of guns did he collect? Do you know what he bought at the pawn shop? Another gun or two? Center Custom Machining. That's another gun. Cabela's. Did you know that Andrew had this step? When did he start drinking? In high school, did you ever know about him drinking? Did you ever catch him drinking? Did you ever smell alcohol on his breath? When did you first see him drinking? You see that there are charges to all these liquor stores. Would that concern you?
Knowing him, he was more than one person was going to drink it.
Mr. Dodd had been married before. What problems you and Mr. Hardesty had. What year did you all divorce? Did Mr. Hardesty pay child support? Do you know anything about the divorce proceedings between Stephanie?
Oh, yeah. I know how much it cost.
Did you pay for it?
Pay for what you have to.
You paid for Andrew's lawyer and Andrew's divorce, joint custody. His work obligations are so disruptive to the children. For the children's stress parenting plan, psychological evaluations, insurance benefits, and quitting jobs that were paying child support. He filed bankruptcy. Do you think he would have stayed married to Stephanie if she had not filed for divorce?
Maybe, I would say.
Did you know that Andy was involved in a hit-and-run accident on June 10th of 2006 while intoxicated?
He was going home. There wasn't any damage that I know of. I saw his car afterwards.
Did you know he was charged with following too close? Do you think that your son intended to hurt anyone when he had his hit-and-run accident?
Well, I don't know, but I don't know. No.
Is it your understanding that Andrew died immediately upon impact?
That's the information that I was given.
Have I been discourteous to you?
I think it's discourteous for me to have to look at all these things that have nothing to do with the real issue here.
So do you think I've been discourteous to you?
I think that the family should not have to go through things that are not pertinent to the...
Have I been polite to you today?
I don't think you've I think you've stretched it a little.
Have I disgraced you in any way?
Somewhat.
How have I disgraced you?
Well, you dug into every little detail, but didn't put any of the good out. It's been one-sided, let's put it that way. He was a person, and a very loving person. I think he focused on a couple of things in his life and haven't really looked for the real value. He was a very loving father, son, and he was a people person. You tried to cut him down every way you can.
Do you feel like LKQ Keystone's attorney is trying to belittle Andy's life here today?
I feel that way.
Do you feel like LKQ Keystone's lawyer is trying to disrespect Andy's family today?
Somewhat, yes.
Let's take a look at our team's experts. We've shown you what your team has given us. Let's take a look at ours. Here is corporate identity expert Bruce Engstrom. He'll also be the expert that brings the financials during the punitive phase of the case, and also bring the financials for purposes of compensatory damages to show feasibility to solve the problem.
Hello, I am Bruce Engstrom, and I'm a certified public accountant, accredited in business valuation, certified in financial forensics, and I am a certified valuation analyst with almost 50 years worth of experience. I have been involved in hundreds of cases, utilizing my experience and credentials in these areas. I have looked at the depositions of LKQ and several of its employees, federal financial filings, and links available on LKQ's website. Based on this information, it appears that LKQ Corporation and Keystone Automotive are part of an excessively fragmented single operating entity. With respect to that, I was asked if I was piercing the corporate veil. I didn't pierce the corporate veil. The corporate veil was pierced right after the lawyers left the boardroom when they first set them up. The inside people working there are constantly piercing the corporate veil. They don't even know who they're working for. Although corporate representatives maintain that LKQ has no employees, and only Keystone has employees and operations, the following information appears to contradict these statements. Both companies have the same CEO, and its activities are directed by the same board of directors. Many of the employees deposed appear to be confused about whether they work for LKQ, Keystone, or both companies. For example, their paychecks say Keystone, but the direct deposits show up in their bank statements as LKQ Corporation. Driver training is performed in an online environment called LKQ University. Insurance coverages, including excess coverage for punitive damages, appear in the name of LKQ and cover Chance McMillian. Fuel cards and cell phones were issued by LKQ. Vehicle repair expenses are directed by and invoiced to LKQ. The LKQ name is prevalent on business cards, emails, new hire applications, handbooks, training documents, policies and procedures, employment consent forms, employee time clock authorizations, confidentiality agreements, checklists, driving policies, job descriptions, payroll deposit records, and IRS forms. Therefore, based on the information, it appears that LKQ Corporation and Keystone Automotive are part of an excessively fragmented single operating business. I was also asked if I was planning in addressing punitive damages. While I will not present an opinion as to a certain amount that I would recommend for punitive damages, I will provide various financial information designed to be of assistance to the court and the jury as they make these decisions. I will, however, provide information about the purpose of punitive damages, which is to be of an amount intended to deter the defendant from allowing these types of actions from occurring again. Thank you.
I believe you all have met Timothy Cheek, our crash reconstructionist.
Keystone and LKQ had a culture of speeding. This is evidenced by speeding reports that come from a GPS device called Geotab that was installed in the company's fleet vehicles. Reports from just one vehicle, the pickup truck driven by Chancellor McMillian at the time of the crash, indicate that over a 66-day period prior to the crash, there were over 8,000 speeding violations during that 66-day period. This comes out to about 124 speeding violations in just one day. Out of those 124 speeding violations, 45 of them would be for speeds greater than 10 miles per hour over the posted speed limit. And many of them would have been for speeds greater than 20 miles per hour over the posted speed limit. It's clear that this should have been a red flag for the management at Keystone and LKQ. On May 17, 2017, just 2 months prior to the crash that took Andrew Hardesty's life, Chancellor McMillian was stopped for speeding by the Missouri Highway Patrol. This speeding infraction would have been reported back to Keystone LKQ, and this would have been a perfect opportunity for the management at Keystone and LKQ to investigate Mr. McMillian's driving habits. In fact, if they had looked the week following Mr. McMillian's traffic stop, they would have seen hundreds of speeding records from just the truck that was involved in the crash. On one day, there were over 200 speeding violations from just that one truck. Sadly, there's no indication that any investigation was ever conducted. Instead of an investigation and training to curb the culture of speeding, on June 13, 2017, just 1 month prior to the crash that took Andrew Hardesty's life, the Geotab device in the pickup truck that Chancellor McMillian was driving mysteriously went offline, and Keystone and LKQ management had notice of this. There's no indication that there was any effort made to determine why the device went offline or to bring it back online. On July 12, 2017, Andrew Hardesty was fatally injured when his car was struck in the rear by a vehicle driven by Chancellor McMillian. On that day, Mr. Hardesty had come to a controlled stop in a temporary construction zone behind two other vehicles. The vehicle immediately in front of Mr. Hardesty was a tractor trailer operated by Donna Ferguson. In front of the tractor trailer was a car with two children in the rear of it. All three vehicles had come to a controlled stop in front of a flagman. Meanwhile, Mr. McMillian, who was operating in his capacity as a delivery driver for Keystone Automotive and LKQ, had begun his trip in Jonesboro, a little over 30 miles north of the work zone. While Mr. McMillian was on his trip, traveling south on Arkansas Highway 1, there's documentation that he was speeding, he was using his cell phone, and he was on opioid medication. During this trip south, Mr. McMillian had passed through several small towns where there were reduced speed limits. We don't know what speed Mr. McMillian was traveling during this entire trip, and that's because the GPS unit had been disabled or removed from the vehicle. However, Mr. McMillian was getting closer to the construction zone. We do know that he was traveling at least 10 miles per hour over the speed limit. He also passed 3 signs warning about the construction zone and the flagman. These signs were spaced about 500 feet apart for a total of at least 1,500 feet of warning before reaching the stopped vehicles. Mr. McMillian either disregarded these warning signs or did not see the signs, we don't know which. But this resulted in Mr. McMillian slamming into the stopped vehicles at a speed of 65 miles per hour.
Our transportation safety fleet expert, David Doherty.
I was hired by Mr. Oliver to evaluate the evidence in this case regarding the Hardesty versus LKQ Keystone matter, and specifically the crash that occurred in Arkansas involving a vehicle driven by Mr. McMillian. I have several opinions I think that would aid you in evaluating this case and also aid the jury in understanding the facts of this case and how egregious this crash was by Mr. McMillian and how it was totally preventable by LKQ. First of all, I'd like to talk with you about the importance of the evidence in this case regarding reckless hiring of Mr. McMillian. The evidence is clear that Mr. McMillian was a convicted felon not one time, but two times, but three times, and by the admission of the executives representing LKQ, he should not have been hired for a driving job. Secondly, there is evidence of reckless supervision regarding the continual employment and allowing Mr. McMillian to drive his truck for the company because of their knowledge of him taking prescription drugs, namely drugs that control blood pressure that was onset, and also for opioid prescription drugs until, by their own admission, they had determined what the effect of his safety performance would be from those drugs. Next, there is reckless conduct on the part of Mr. McMillian independently for being willing to text while driving his vehicle down the roadway. In this day, and regarding all of the evidence and the information that we get through all of our safety organizations, texting and driving kills. Don't text, it can wait. He should have known this. The company should have made sure that he knew this, and the company had opportunities to be able to control that and prevent that had they been willing to do that. Lastly, there is reckless evidence on the part of Mr. McMillian, and LKQ knew or should have known that he was a speeder and that there was an independent speeding culture on the part of Mr. McMillian, and by LKQ's willingness to ignore his individual speeding, they have a company safety culture of speeding. Mr. McMillian was caught by the Missouri Department of Transportation while driving a commercial motor vehicle for LKQ in Missouri several weeks before this crash. In that particular event, LKQ knew that Mr. McMillian, was speeding and also did not have a DOT medical certification, which he was required by regulation to have. From that particular event and that knowledge, LKQ was put on notice that Mr. McMillian was a speeder. They had the geotab records on the vehicle and the ability to track and audit his speeding conduct, and had they done that, they would have found hundreds of speeding violations by Mr. McMillian. Now, the evidence in this case is that Mr. McMillian was taking a prescription. He tested positive at the time of the crash for opioids. There's evidence that he was texting just in the minutes before this particular crash, leading up to this crash, and there's evidence that he was speeding into a construction zone. All of these lead to the propensity and the likelihood of a crash and 100% chance that there's going to be a death at this scene. All of this was preventable by LKQ. Certainly it was preventable by Mr. McMillian. He drove into a
construction scene without looking or being impaired. LKQ must change their policy or more crashes like this are going to lead to that.
And Breck McDaniel, our cell phone analysis, which his opinions are not complete because we've been prohibited from receiving the full data. But here's what we have so far.
Despite being provided partial information, I was able to come to some pertinent conclusions in this matter. First, it's clear to me that Mr. McMillian purposely turned on his work phone's cellular Wi-Fi hotspot function so he could presumably use data from LKQ's data plan by connecting his personal cell phone to the Wi-Fi network of the LKQ work phone. Mr. McMillian did this at 9:34 a.m. shortly before the wreck. Based on my extensive experience, I believe it is highly probable that Mr. McMillian used the company's phone's hotspot function in order to keep from paying for expensive data usage on his personal cell phone and or to obtain internet connectivity that may have been unavailable on his personal cell phone due to coverage issues. Maintaining an internet connection on his personal cell phone would have been necessary for any type of internet data usage on his personal cell phone, such as video chat like Apple's FaceTime, video streaming like Google's YouTube, or many other applications such as Gmail, email, social media such as Facebook, Instagram, and so forth. Typically, the amount of data usage for a phone is reflected on the cell phone bill. Therefore, as a result, anyone that would have reviewed the bill would have noticed unusual amounts of data usage. In fact, cell phone usage while driving is the most likely explanation as to why Mr. McMillian was so distracted that he never took his vehicle off cruise control while traveling through a construction zone, past warning signs and cones, and eventually crashing into a car stopped in front of him. Additionally, based on my over 20 years of law enforcement experience, including years undercover as a narcotics investigator in Houston, Texas, there is strong evidence from text messages that Mr. McMillian sold illegal drugs the evening before the crash. For example, Mr. McMillian received a text stating, "I'm at Fat City right now, can I get an eighth?" And an eighth is typical slang for an eighth of an ounce of powder cocaine. Also, Fat City is a restaurant in Jonesboro, Arkansas, and it's apparently where the exchange took place. And as a result of what I've seen, Mr. McMillian was likely selling illegal narcotics. In fact, Mr. McMillian's day job, making many daily stops, small, independently owned, small repair shops, is a type of job conducive to the selling of illegal narcotics. Finally, as previously stated in this case, all the materials that could have been extracted from the personal and work cell phones were not extracted and or reported. In fact, it is possible to do a more extensive extraction than was done by the defendant's expert. And based on the information I have reviewed, it appears that the defendant's expert, Mr. Fry, was instructed to provide limited information that did not include all of the data from the phones. If such instructions were given, it is probable that the instructions were given so as to limit potentially incriminating evidence such as direct evidence of cell phone use at the time of the crash, as well as potentially additional evidence indicating illegal narcotics activity. Nonetheless, even with the limited information I have been analyzed, it paints a picture of a driver who was texting shortly before the wreck, was most likely involved in illegal drug sales, and was probably using his company cell phone in order to provide internet via Wi-Fi to his personal cell phone while driving.
In conclusion, I'd like to go over some of our jury research in this case. Our firm has a focus group based practice where we do jury research and focus groups and jury simulations and mock trials throughout the process of the case. We start early on at the intake phase before we dive off into the case with doing different types of testing with mock trials and focus groups. Then we do another series of focus groups before the discovery phase, before written discovery and depositions. Then during the deposition process, we do more focused deep dive focus groups to help prepare for the questions in our deposition process. And then after depositions, we do a series of focus groups to prepare for trial. In this case, we have done jury research on over 100 jurors throughout Arkansas to determine what the hot issues are in this case, how people feel about this case. And what I'm about to show you is separate and distinct from the jury research that we sent you over a month-long period with about 25 different emails. This is separate and distinct. You've not seen this particular set of jury research yet.
Like even if I'm like tired and out of it, I'm still just like, you see all that. Yeah, it's a orange sign in your face. Like you're gonna see it.
And if you're looking down texting or if you're doing whatever, you're still gonna swerve.
I don't think that it's right to drive with them anyways. And if you're working and you're getting paid to do something and to do your job, and if you're messed up on medicine, regardless if it's prescription or not, that affects everything. And not just was he irresponsible, but the company was irresponsible too, since he said that they knew about it. So it's I feel like it just lies under everybody's belt. Like everyone was responsible for that.
Listen to the language that the jurors use.
Now I know from previous experience with the companies I've worked with, the GPS stuff, all supervisors. Now I know a company that big probably has an HR department that shoots too, but with the electronics and the modern technology we have today, anybody and everybody in that department, like you said, used to red flags that you looked at. That was just turning, again, like a blind eye.
So in this case, that was a reckless hire because they blatantly disregarded their own policy. When this individual, he was dishonest about his degree, but he was upfront about all of his other convictions. He didn't hide that. And he would have had that conversation probably openly if they would have had that. So they hired an individual that they didn't talk to, and they didn't follow their own policy of forwarding up to the legal department to have a conversation and make a decision if they should consider this individual or not.
And speeding is something he's been doing. Speeding is something he's been doing before the medication. He got pulled over too much prior to the accident, so therefore he's been speeding. So it's always been something he's been doing, and put it on cruise control, just something he kept. Yeah. So
and unless he wasn't actually looking at the road, there's no way he didn't see those construction signs. There was like several of them. Like how do you just not see it?
I feel like it's a blatant disregard for the law and the rules that the company set out from the very beginning, and also a blatant disregard for a person's life. If they're going to allow Chance to be in this vehicle knowing that he has all of these charges against him, he's putting everybody around him in danger and at risk. And if he's doing it, how many other employees do they have that are on the same line?
I think it's reasonable to assume that they not only allow but possibly encourage this behavior with people making quotes of, oh, at times you have to do what you have to do and drive more than the speed limit. That's what their employees have to say about the deadlines that are set for them, and he gets a ticket from highway patrol and then is allowed to continue to speed. I have the software in my car that shows exactly where I am when I see the health of my vehicle, and I get an email if I go over the speed limit in a certain amount of time. You're telling me $1 billion corporation does not have enough care to monitor their employees that are driving company vehicles? If it gets wrecked or if they get pulled over, their laws?
Total disregard for anything, hiring, supervising, everything on this company, because if they'd really been concerned, the moment he left the yard and circled back around to his house, the safety officer would have known his truck was stopped. For what? That should have been a call. He said there were no calls on his cell phone, on the company phone. It's clean. So nobody's watching. So total disregard for their safety. That's where I'd be looking closer on this case is in the safety officer. They had to have one. Why he let him go back to his house? nobody that's in any of the vehicles I ever had could go back to their house. If they're on the job, they're on the job. What do you go back to the house for? What do you get? What do you forget? Maybe he forgot his medicine. Well, I don't know how tall he is or how heavy he is, but the doctor's going to be able to tell me, is that going to affect him if he took his medicine at that time until that accident? So the safety officer didn't care. The warehouse manager didn't care. And this was right after they wrote him up, that he had been caught speeding and also in a vehicle that he's not registered to drive because he doesn't have the proper driver's license. So total disregard. It is on blatant paper that they totally disregard what this was. This is exactly what you said. They're just filling seats to make money.
Do you think LKQ gives him pressure? Like I've heard, I don't have any idea what it's like in the food industry, but I've heard, gosh, the deadlines it's stressful. They have to go to point A to point B.
Oh, they do. He worked for O'Reilly's, getting all the parts and.
They had a big TV in the back, and they can see exactly where you are, how fast you're going, and they have a point system.
At the same time, it all boils down to we all have a choice.
Yeah.
We all have a choice to speed.
But they also give you
in
more
that car.
than that.
And to me, this is a clear-cut preventative accident. It could have been prevented.
Yes.
The company could have prevented this from the very get-go. Yet
Well,
they
the doctor never
terminated.
should have.
I agree, and as a personal responsibility on chance, he should have taken personal responsibility of not driving on it.
Yeah, I guess we can just go through and just say our initial, and then after we hear this, then maybe it would change what we think. I think LKQ Keystone is negligent and reckless for all of the events that occurred. However, I think that they will hide behind their policy and their language and push it off on individuals such as Chance, the supervisor, and try to get out of it. But I do think that they're responsible because they relax in all of their stated policies and processes.
I agree.
Anybody disagree?
No, I agree.
Like I said before, I don't think that his chances fall in any way. I think this all falls on LKQ.
I personally feel like I understand like where you're coming from as well. Like I don't think it's 100% Chance's fault. I think partially it is as well, just because he chose to do that. You know what I mean? And he didn't choose to take the medicine. I'm not sure. It was in his system though, right? When he said that, it was right in his system. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I feel like it is partially his fault as well, because he knew better than to get behind the wheel. He knew better, but also it is the company's fault as well, because they knew as well, and they still were like, hey.
How did
I can't believe they tried to pull the drinking card though.
I know, right?
Like he spends $50 a month on liquor.
That's nothing.
That's not it. That can only be a couple things, actually.
Yeah, right.
As
A month?
That could be a month.
I can see it.
You just spend like $200 or $300 a month on some alcohol.
But either way, he was not driving.
Right.
And
That wasn't the question.
he's the person that lost his life.
Yeah, that's
I mean, that could be like a cheap bottle of wine a
That
week
doesn't
though.
matter.
Yeah.
That doesn't.
It's totally irrelevant.
Exactly, that has nothing to do with with
The
the
bag.
present. It has nothing to do with the present.
This particular jury research had 3 different deliberation groups who discussed punitive damages.
The wrongdoer and others from similar conduct. In order to recover punitive damages from LKQ Corporation, plaintiff has the burden of proving by clear and convincing evidence that LKQ Corporation and knew or ought to have known in the light of the surrounding circumstances that their conduct would naturally and probably result in injury, and that it continued such conduct in reckless disregard of the consequences from which malice may be inferred. In arriving at the amount of punitive damages, you may consider the financial condition of LKQ Corporation as shown by the evidence. Clear and convincing evidence is proof that enables you without hesitation to reach a firm conviction that the allegation is true. You are not required to assess punitive damages against LKQ Corporation, but you may do so if justified by the evidence. You may consider an award of punitive damages only if you found the advocacy trust of administrator of the estate of Andrew J. Hardesty, deceased, is entitled to recover compensatory damages.
Okay, so everybody agrees that LQK, whatever,
Okay.
that they are responsible in punitive damages and in suffering damages. In the agreement, we all agree that.
Okay.
Verdict Form 2 says, do you find by clear and convincing evidence that LKQ Keystone Automotive knew or ought to have known in light of surrounding circumstances that its conduct would naturally and probably result in injury to Andrew J. Hardesty, and that it continued such conduct with reckless disregard of the consequences from which malice may be inferred and punitive damages assessed? We all said yes. We, the jury, find as to punitive damages for the plaintiff and against defendants, LKQ Keystone Automotive, in the following amount. That's our $200 million, right? Okay.
Do you find by clear and convincing evidence that LKQ Keystone Automotive knew or ought to have known, in light of the surrounding circumstances, that its conduct would naturally and probably result in injury to Andrew J. Hardesty, and that it continued such conduct with reckless regard of the consequences from which malice may be inferred and punitive damage assessed? This is a yes or no.
Yes.
Yes. Everybody was yes?
Yes. Yeah.
As you can see, we used the exact jury instructions that we anticipate the judge will charge the jury with in our jury research and our jury simulations.
What did we decide on Andy's conscious pain and suffering? The 7 seconds before the accident happened, that he knew he was going to die.
See, that was all in the compensatory.
Right.
Okay.
And that we decided on 200, right?
Right.
And the way, and the way that I figured that out initially was I took that 50 and times it by that 7 seconds. So just throughout discussion, that's how I broke it down.
That's terrifying. To like sit there and watch someone about to like hit you and know you're gonna die and like try and avoid it.
And there's nothing.
There's nothing you can do.
Even hardest part about it is knowing it's gonna happen. You got that in your head, and knowing there is not a damn thing you can't avoid it. There's nothing.
You're just gonna die.
You even tried to, but you got to think about that.
Which is, I think, is even worse.
Scary,
Right. I mean,
that he tried to get out of the way.
I keep looking at that board over there and I see, the truck way back and then it's there and then,
right.
the point of impact.
Right.
And what could he be thinking?
Right at that moment.
Like he's looking, seeing that coming at him.
On 9/11, me and my boyfriend were talking about how everyone in the plane, like who were like trying to like make calls to their family, like knowing knowing you're going to die, I think is the worst thing that you could possibly go through. Aside from actually dying.
Seeing it come.
Just like the whole plane ride, knowing you're gonna hit the building.
Should it be in the millions? Should it be in the thousands? What do we think?
Definitely millions. I think millions.
Yeah, I'm definitely thinking a million.
I'm not
Somebody gives me
thinking
like some
like,
$1,000 for my dad, it's going down again.
Yeah.
Maybe 75 million for.
Each person?
I think that's too much.
75 million?
I'm thinking like.
I was
10
thinking
10 to
like,
20.
yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking 25.
I was thinking between 10 and 30. That's what I was thinking.
And 25 for the like dad, mom, sister, brother, and then more for the daughters.
Thinking like 15 for the dad, mom, sister, brother, and about 20, 25 for the children.
This is compensatory discussion.
That's not something that's really negotiable because there's a life that's lost. So it's almost like if you have to exceed expectations, basically, in so many words. So I don't know. It comes back down to knowing exactly the laws and the regulations on how much they can actually award a person. But if it is that, then the paperwork is not going to add up because the company has been neglecting their employees. So, I mean, the company, they don't have anything to really stand on at this point. So I feel like the family could be even awarded up to $1 billion. I mean, it really is no limit at this point, in my opinion.
And it's not just about this case, it's about creating change. So
Yeah,
if
exactly.
we, I mean, if this case, if they're like, oh, well, we only paid out like,
Yeah,
you know,
so
like
we
a
did-
couple
yeah,
million, but that's
yeah.
way below our budget. It's fine.
Not gonna affect them.
The 500 is for the kids, I think it should
So
be.
250 each for kids?
each, yeah.
You know, you want to be this, we want to
250
influence
each
all
or
we can, but
I
you
think
need
it
to
should
stand
be
on
500
what you think
each.
is right.
I think it should be 500 each for the kids. Okay, that
Yeah.
sounds more like it. I think so.
I like 500.
Yeah.
It's a good number. All right, now.
I mean, those kids lost their dad. Yeah, they lost their dad. They will never be able to share their grandchildren.
LKQ Keystone has a tower of insurance. Iron Shore Specialty at $25 million. Federal Insurance, the next level at $25 million. North American Capacity Insurance Company, $25 million. Continental Casualty Insurance Company, $25 million. And I sincerely hope, for purposes of evaluation, that all levels of insurance are reviewing this information, reviewing this file, reviewing the information we're providing to you so that you can assess and mitigate risk in this case. Our jury research shows significant damages will be assessed and the monetary exposure for the defendants is in excess of policy limits.